Hello and welcome to another episode of the Revenue Revolution podcast, sponsored by Joint Flows. Today, we're joined by the CEO and founder of Tactic, Rudy Lai. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me. Nice to see you guys today.
Likewise. Appreciate you being on the show. I always like to put a bit of a backstory to the guests before we jump into it. So bring our listeners up to speed. Who is Rudy? Tell us all about your background and how you got to where you are today.
For sure. I'm Rudy. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tactic. I am originally from Hong Kong. I came to the UK to study computer science. It was a time when technology was not big in Asia. I then started off in investment banking in the algorithmic trading business. Quite the kind of career inflection point because I originally joined as a quant, or what you know as a data scientist. But because of my growing ability to explain math in plain English, I got moved to the sales team very shortly after. So I was a fairly technical salesperson for 5 years, basically selling to hedge funds, private equity funds, pension funds. All of our pensions go in those funds. And then after 5 years, I thought it was the right time to take a little bit more risk. And I basically started freelancing and looking at different startups to find the next opportunity. I joined the incubator called Entrepreneur First. You guys must have heard of it. But basically, about 2 years of working on various projects led me to the idea of Tactic, which really was kind of applying some of the CRM data work that I did in the bank in a software and SaaS kind of setting. So we kind of started late 2019, early 2020 with my co-founder, Jack. First year was really kind of making some money, trying to figure out like what the product should be. Second year, we figured out what the product should be. We started building it. Growth started happening. End of 2021, early 2022, we raised the seed round with Index Ventures. And then we navigated the 2022 market change. And here we are in 2023, still thriving and really enjoying all the craziness that the market throws at you every day.
Amazing. And so that's a great recap of who you are up until now. So appreciate it. I think a good starting point is just on that journey itself as well. So obviously coming from banking, going into more of a tech environment, I'd say. What drove that change?
I wanted to take more risk. I felt like being in a large company is fun and is established, but I think the kind of contrast is quite large, right? Like in a large investment bank, like a Morgan Stanley or like a Merrill Lynch, outbound is not a thing because you have touched every single prospect available on earth at any given point in time. And like if you call up with Morgan Stanley, who isn't going to pick up, right? Morgan Stanley is calling you. And I feel like there was challenge, but there was a lot more like organizationally related or political or kind of procedural challenges rather than like business challenges, right? Like how do you start kind of high growth and a separate business unit? So actually, in my last 2 years in banking, I was running a new team in a kind of big umbrella. We're starting sort of a new algo trading business in commodities. So that meant we were trading base metals, precious metals, food like orange juice. So that was quite interesting, but it was, I think, doubly challenging to kind of start something new in a very established old company, especially when however fast you grow in a $10 billion business, you're always going to be a drop in the ocean, right? So I thought like, let's, I was young, let's take some risk, and that's why I made the change.
Amazing.
So you must have some crazy stories from your investment banking time. Like where do you see the overlap between what you're doing now as an entrepreneur and what you've learned through those big corps and the hype of investment banking?
I think the most similar thing, and the thing that I wish actually it's easier to bring across, it's in an investment bank, you get kind of, you both get really good people in, so like the bar is really high, you work with like some really crazily dedicated smart people, and they also hammer in from day one that everybody's a salesperson. So no matter where you sit on the floor, you're a salesperson, right? So that created this like extremely commercial organization that is very hard to replicate elsewhere, because in the, I guess, two industries that I've seen, in finance, it's a very kind of, for lack of a better word, it's not a very inclusive industry, right? Like you kind of start in finance, you start a graduate program, and you kind of go from there. Like it's very rare that you do 5 years of McKinsey and then you start as an MD in JP Morgan. That just doesn't happen. It's all very homegrown, and sort of you survive and you get senior. If you don't survive, you're done. So there's like, everybody is very kind of commercial. Everybody has like a similar training. Everybody has a very high professional standard. And that's reflected on the work that you do and everything. And I think, of course, there's the pros and cons, right? So when you step out of this, what I think created a lot of success at Tactic is kind of me bringing that playbook over and saying, look, everybody needs to be customer obsessed, right? Like I don't care if you're not kind of speaking to the customer or anything. It's not, we don't need it to be that level where everybody can pitch Tactic on a drop of a hat, but we all need to be obsessed about what the customer's problem is. How do we best serve them as a solution? Understand that it's about listening first and solving things second. That's, I think it's like very well, I guess, brought across. What's very different is obviously, I think, the diversity, and I think for that, it's not only around, I guess, surface level diversity, all the normal kind of axes, but more, you can have a room of people that look and sound different, but they're all from Oxbridge, and so like it's not really that diverse. Whereas I think in tech you get a lot more different perspectives, and you get a lot more different experiences. You get a lot more founders, which gives you just a completely different view of life. Like you guys, I know you kind of from Udify, and then you have outreach experience mixed in there. It's just a much better kind of mix of perspectives, and you guys can like have much more creative ideas. And so that's what you don't find in a big bank, where like in a big bank it's all very kind of polished, right? And with the polish comes sort of a specific way of doing things, and nothing else.
Yeah, I see it. Like we speak about everybody's sales, everybody's marketing within Join Flows, and this is something I've learned from my past roles as well. Is as soon as you start thinking that you do not belong into someone else's team, then there's a silo and there's a wall, and it becomes really hard to actually grow together towards the same goal. But I find it really hard to scale and to teach, because eventually you become bigger and bigger, and then you hire for the skill set, and then you hire for the personality and that thing that is missing, which separates and kind of creates a separation essentially between the teams. How do you find a successful way to actually stay consistent and scale around that cohesion?
I think in the very early stages, like where we're now, we're both very early. You basically have to have sort of well-rounded people really everywhere. So we don't specifically call this out, but like I have a friend's company where they say like everybody is like a full stack engineer, but you're biased towards front end or back end. So then maybe, I'm guessing, if they have a sales team, then everybody's a customer rep, but you're biased against new logos, or biased on upsell, or biased on inbound, whatever it is. And I think early doors, you just can't have that division, like the divisions that you see even at 100-person company like can't be implemented at a 10-person company or even a 50-person company. Like you probably need to like raise your hiring bar really high and have sort of well-rounded people who are mostly growth and commercially minded, but just so happens that their skill set is data science or AI or LLMs or whatever. And so like finding those people becomes the hardest bit. It's actually a very challenging problem because you also would get to the situation where you just have this person who is very commercially minded or very kind of early stage, but they can't prospect, right? And then you put them in a like an outbound role. That's it. Like they are done and you're done, and it's not fair to either party. So it's a very tricky balance, but I would think that at the start of every small team, everybody's skill set like more or less overlaps, and you have like different kind of, I guess, strong points and the outside. And then as you get bigger and bigger, these start like the overlap starts like disappearing. But I think it's never too late to start specializing, but people do it too early. Like I've seen too many times where people do it too early rather than doing it too late.
Yeah. And it's an interesting point you made. I think you guys are at 24, 25 employees now. Is that right? So obviously you've done quite a bit of scaling in the last 3-4 years or so. What's both one of the things that surprised you in a good way about that scaling process? And what's one of the things that surprised you in a bad way?
So surprising in a good way and surprising in a bad way.
Yeah.
I would say the good way is I guess a good way is like good people can come from really anywhere, right? Like there isn't like you don't have to get somebody 18 months ahead from a company 18 months ahead of you with a growth curve that you want to emulate in the same industry, selling the same products. Like there's like 5 of those people. It's very like chances are you're not going to get them, not because you're not good, but because they're not available. So I think that the one that surprises me is like kind of good people come from anywhere, right? We have people who come from early stage startups, mid stage startups, late stage startups, like corporates. And I think there's a lot about what the team is doing and what the team has done that is just not something that I would credit myself for. And then actually maybe if 75% of the whole thing, it's just us putting the right team in the right room, and then they're self-organizing and like management happens, like we designed the org correctly. And so like I think it's quite amazing what kind of 20 people can go into a room and do themselves without like a huge amount of, I guess, supervision, which is what you want, right? But like I'm always thankful every day that it takes me less effort than I think for the team to be productive and for the team to be creative and come up with solutions that I guess it's like, because what you want is like the innovation happens without you being there, right? Like that's the key bar. I think I wouldn't say it's a surprisingly bad, but a surprisingly challenging thing, I think, is the like getting the skills right, because in an early stage company, the skills you need changes so quickly and changes with each iteration of your product market fit hypotheses. You might hire somebody with the best intentions and they're a perfect fit for what you're trying to do now, but like it may not be future proof. And it's not bad, it's just hard, right? Like, you know, your business model changes. Like, can people change fast enough with you or not? And like when they don't, like you have to be very, I guess, quick and fair to people to say, look, the fit isn't happening. We're not being fair to your career as much as just other things that we need from the team. And I think we certainly have made more than our fair share of mistakes of like acting too slow, not being direct enough, not helping enough. And I think ultimately as founders, we're responsible for our team's careers and their ambitions and their successes. And you need to be like, I guess, in front of the team and being responsible and help them out. And that's the part. Yeah.
So just on that last point, how important is it to start setting up processes and documentations and things like this early on to support with that onboarding piece when you do get new starters in the business?
So I think it's a mix of things, right? It depends on the role. So we're talking about revenue in this podcast. So in terms of the revenue roles, I've tried a few things and they all work sort of. So, I think kind of onboarding is extremely important, but I would challenge, or I would say processes and documentation is not less important, but like it's debatable at the moment, right? Like you definitely want to have a plan to onboard. You want to have metric expectations. You want to have enough information, but we're still at a size where kind of everybody can onboard everybody else, and then you can just kind of come together with a plan. And not that you want to keep it loose, but often at the numbers that we're onboarding over a period of time and the I guess the information surface, it's not worth it to write anything down or have some procedure. Like typically what I do, it's I put together like a 4-week kind of spreadsheet that says this is what the first 20-day looks like. If it's more of a leader hire, then they would come with the first 30 60 90 kind of plan, and then we'll kind of like jointly execute on that and make sure that like all the information is there. I think because actually now that you say this, I think because as startups we're constantly trying to adapt to the market, actually everybody is constantly kind of being onboarded, so to say, and the hardest bit is actually to understand the market you're serving, because by definition you're building something new, right? Like nobody's rebuilding exactly, nobody's rebuilding outreach, people are building new things. And so by definition, like nobody understands the market apart from the startup. So what we have found that's quite useful, it's like, okay, you have these like onboarding kind of plans, and you start producing things and you start understanding the value prop, but then a big lift comes from weekly all hands and weekly sort of group meetings where you talk about the latest things that are coming in the market. Everybody shares what they're seeing in the market. Everybody highlights important challenges and important opportunities in the market. And then we all contribute into like how we solve this with our own skill sets and specialties. And that's how you kind of like continually drive it forward. I would say you at this stage is probably a little bit dangerous if somebody is just handed like an onboarding plaque, they get 4 weeks of attention and they're done. Like that just probably is too rigid for a startup to succeed.
There's something already you mentioned which I really liked, is you spoke about being responsible for those early employees' careers, and I don't think this is something you do when you're in a corporation with like 1,000 employees. It's like, oh, are you joining your employee number 766 and good luck kind of things. Like, but how do you set that up to start with? Like, is there a mutual agreement between you and the person you're going to hire around the fact that this is a journey and this is going to take a few years to build and these are the career path, but at the same time you don't have full visibility on what's going to happen, over those few years? Like, how do you create this environment to start with?
Yeah, I would say so. It's not early, it's every employee, I guess, at least at the start of the journey. And I think it's a culture point that you want to build early on, right? So of course, like even forget 7,000, like at 50 you probably can't think of everybody's situation, but what you want to do is like instill this culture where every leader, every manager, every team member is like helping each other on their own careers, because you do your best work, you get your career, like your career progresses, but also to progress your career 99 times out of 100 it's progressing the company in a material way. So it's about like setting the expectation and kind of setting that culture. So that's number one. Number two is in every kind of recruiting call, in every interview, like one of the things I often say is, so like somebody would always ask, right, what's your runway? Right. Well, how likely am I going to have a job in 18 months? And I think this is the opportunity to be really frank, and the kind of talk track I always have, it's you join a startup for the pros and the cons, right? So the pro is it's a smaller company, it's more nimble, it's more creative, and most importantly, you're creating your own luck, right? Like whatever you close, whatever you grow is yours, and also it's very attributed to you, and also it means that the company grows and you get more opportunity, right? Like you kind of build the organization below you. But then the flip side, it's you don't have a lot of time to do it. Like you don't have, it's not going to take a few years. Like you find out every 18 months whether you did something right. And there's no way around this risk, right? Like you can even dressing it up is pointless, because you could talk to enough founders, you talk to enough early stage execs like yourselves, you would know. Like there's no getting around the fact that you take VC, you're there to like take risk and you're there to grow. And like I think this is one of the weird times where people are like, oh, let's kind of push
Not
it down.
have one. Yeah.
You can also imagine like if you take a big Series A in 2022 and then you don't grow for 4 years, you're not going to get Series B. Just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think it's sort of like three things that need to be very clear, right? Number one is the opportunity is for you to create. Number two is there's a lot of risk and you need to be okay with that risk. Number three is with anybody who comes to work at a startup with their backgrounds, it's not worth trying more than X number of months. Like the opportunity cost is too high, right? You can always go work for Google for whatever the amount of money. And so I think this is kind of how I position it for everybody, where you need to be here to take risk and take the reward. You need to be here to be like okay with the sort of existential risk. And then lastly, it's you recognize that if you don't have this job, you'll find a new job tomorrow. It's fine. And like you will, it's long term, I think, more fair for everybody. Like if somebody gets to that point, you're like, oh guys, actually, like this is really not for me. I've got 5 houses and 15 mortgages. Then like it's good, like it's cool. Like I don't want us to find out after you're on board and you're like, hey guys, I can't pay my mortgage. So that's where we are.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very, very logical answer. Actually, it makes a lot of sense. It's probably I'll be listening back to this recording at some point in the near future and having that conversation myself, hopefully. Awesome. So one of the things you mentioned earlier on, actually off camera, is the journey from being more bootstrapped, moving to being VC backed as well. Talk a little bit about that and kind of the pros and cons you're seeing of what it was like before pre being VC backed and obviously post being VC backed as well.
Yeah, so I think it's quite a nuanced thing, right? Because there's also like, are you VC backed in 2021 or are you VC backed in 2023?
Yeah.
I think my answer today, right? Like, and this is going to change as time goes on. My answer today, it's you should always think like a bootstrapped founder, right? Like it should always be money in, money out. And I think raising money always feels like a fun thing to do. Let's put it that way. But I think in hindsight, I can't see why more, I guess, business discipline wouldn't be like would have downsides, so to say. Like what I mean by that, it's if you spend prudently and if you spend with purpose and you spend the VC in that way, like you're not going to not hyper grow. Like if you're 2021 if you're 2020 hop in, you're going to grow regardless of what you do, right? Like if you nail your product market fit, if you nail your execution, if you nail your hiring, you're going to grow regardless. And the funding enables you to kind of grow in a very outsized way, and you can sort of borrow from the future. But like I think what I think, at least for myself, I kind of let my discipline slip a bit. It's when we were bootstrapped, like every dollar counts, right? You just have to maximize every deal. You have to close every deal now, and every deal needs to be upfront. And once you get VC, like I guess it's quite scary to need to grow 10x between rounds. And so you're like, oh, maybe I need to do this to like change my behavior. I wanted to do that to change the behavior. But actually, what you actually needed to do is to keep playing the fundamentals and then layer in the VC to go to the next level, rather than like play a completely different game. And actually, I think this is something that they talk a lot about in sports psychology, right? Like a lot of people play differently in whatever sport, right? Poker, basketball, soccer, you play differently as you go up the ranks, or as you go to different leagues, or you play against different teams. Especially when you're playing against different teams, like you play one way when you have a very formidable opponent because you think you need to play differently, but actually what you need to do is stick to the basics. And I think the kind of journey from bootstrap to VC has a similar trap where, you know, you bootstrapped or you pre-seed and you don't have a lot of money and you're trying to like really get the business going. And then you kind of like get VC and then you're like, oh, there's this pressure release, but there actually isn't this pressure release. What you need to do is just continue executing on the basics, improve on the basics, and maybe scale the basics with the VC. But like, it's not a time to, I guess, change the way you have been doing things. So that's my, I guess, summary of the situation.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And is there a specific milestone that you felt you had to achieve before you started taking VC money?
So hindsight is 2020. When we raised VC, it was just it was this year where we just couldn't not close business. We're just closing business left, right, and center. Deals were gigantic. Multi-year deals started dropping for a seed stage startup. It was insane. And I remember like this one week where people were calling us to help us close their own deals. And that's just completely different.
Great place to be.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure you guys have this, I guess, nightmare every time it's end of a quarter where you're just like refreshing for DocuSign links coming in. When like leading up to the seed round, people were calling us and say, "Hey, I need to sign this. Like, this is how much I have to give you. Like, send me a contract, I'll sign it." And then we send a contract. Oh, I've signed it. Thank you. And they call me back. And so like when this started happening across like 4 or 5 different customers, and the deal sizes were giant, and you're getting giant logos everywhere. I think for me, that was like sort of like a gut instinct of like, I have to raise now. So that's how like that raise kind of happened. And I think now if I look back, I would have planned it a lot more concretely. Like I would be like, okay, if I raise, because now I know what I need to deliver after I've raised the VCs. Go another time. I would be like, look, if I need to deliver this much growth with this much cash, I better get the business to this point, right? So like maybe seed, I would say I want to see 10 customers, no real customer concentration, so no customers bigger than 20%. Early kind of go to market, so like you have early pipeline, like maybe the pipeline is not very solid, but you have pipeline, and then okay, fine, that's seed. And then from seed to A, you want to see, okay, like accelerating pipeline, and like you're holding your ACV, you're holding your NRR, you're holding your NPS, and like you have like a clear path to go from that size to 10 times bigger in product terms, in market terms, in team terms, and all of these things. And you want all of these things to happen, and then you raise like A. So now like I have a very different perspective. But back then, I'm sure every entrepreneur goes through this, right? Like for some reason, fundraising is just an extremely opaque thing. Like if I ever had time, I'd go write a book about this. But it's just very opaque. Like before you raise VC, you just don't know what it is. Like you Twitter and you're like, oh my God, like I could raise this. And then you kind of like there should be a handbook, because like it's not that complicated. You just need to like get the few basic things right. But yes, like when I first raised VC, it was I'm not going to flatter myself and say I had a plan like very kind of well nailed down. At least not compared to like how I understand the plan should be at this current moment.
Yeah. So do you think that part of your decision to go VC, so I'll hand the mic back to you in just a second, I promise, but do you think part of the reason you went to VC then was because you were kind of riding the high of a wave and saying, hey, people are calling me up, like we're unstoppable right now, this is probably the time to do it if we were going to do it, like more maximizing your situation? Or do you think it was like, hey, we're here at the top of the wave, and actually if we just got this little bit, X amount of investment, we can take that next leap?
So I think maybe it's a little bit in between that. Like back then, I remember I was fairly intuition driven around this thing. So the reason why I raised VC was all the evidence and all the kind of market learning enabled me to work on my vision in a way that I think this could become a 10, $20 billion business. Like I can see the path from where I was to 20 billion. And so the tool to get to 20 billion is VC, right? So like if I didn't see the path to like a giant kind of fast growing technology company that could define a category, I think I would have raised VC in a much more pretentious kind of situation. But back then, as is now, like we're executing on a game plan that allows us to get to that point, which I think warrants VC, right? Where it's not like there are a lot of products that doesn't carry that far, like, but still very profitable, right? Your restaurant train, your ed tech, your book, your some sort of course. All of these things make a gigantic amount of money. But you typically won't use VC to fund them, like maybe PE, maybe angel money, maybe it's revenue funded. Maybe it's like you do one of those like B2C borrowing things, but you won't do VC because the structure it's not the right solution. Whereas the problem we're trying to solve with unstructured data, like that seemed like a thing that VC was part of the solution, which is why we took VC at like, I mean, I say that we selected to take VC, but that's a generous way to put
it. So is the expectation, because we speak about this a lot with other founders or, very early exec team members. What's the main expectation from the VC support? Is it obviously financial, but what's the second best thing? Is it the network? Right. Is it the knowledge? Is it what is it?
So it's money, brand, and network. Well, I mean, everybody loves to say money isn't here. So brand and network.
and what do you mean by brand?
So brand can be expressed in a very simple way. I can go at any CEO on LinkedIn and I can say I'm an index funded founder, and I'll get a connect back. Right. It's as simple as that. Like Index, Sequoia, Excel, all of these guys like give you that badge. We launch on TechCrunch, which it's probably not going to happen if you're not one of these few VCs, and we definitely rode on the coattails of their brand. Like, who am I, right? I'm just one guy in London. But like with the support of our partners from Index Ventures, we I guess take advantage of their brand, their network, their kind of track record, and we're able to do things that I think we otherwise wouldn't be able to do. And similarly for other investors, right? Like we get to attend events, we get to meet people, and so on and so forth. I think that, but I need to this caveat this. It's like I'm a very brand and person focused kind of guy because of my background. Like I love networking. I love knowing ambitious people. And I know equal amounts of founders who are like more about the mass, right? They're like, okay, I get like Sequoia funding. I'm going to like increase my Twitter followers. I'm going to increase the reach of my brand. And like, that's how I'm going to grow the business. So I think it's just like all of these guys are so experienced that you take what you want from it.
And what do you wish you got more of from your VC network, from experience you've got with other founders as well? Like what do you feel like often the relationship with VC falls short when you don't get X, Y, Z?
I don't think there's one particular thing, because often people would expect things from VC that they would never provide. It's a little bit like building a team, right? Building a board and building a team is very similar. Like you won't expect the SDR to be able to close, and you won't expect the AE to be able to cold call. Like just, I mean, I know it's a controversial topic, but
I say you gotta expect the AEs to cold call now.
But what I mean by that, it's like everybody has their focus, and like of course people are going to do it, right? Like if you ask the SDR to go close business, they're going to do it. Like if you ask the AE to go cold call, they're going to do it, but they're not the best placed to do it, either in terms of their focus, in terms of the challenges that they're tackling, the context switch that they need. So it's not like they can't do it. If anything, they might have been very good at it at some point in time. And I think similarly for when you grow like a board or you build a cap table, there are VCs where they give you the brand, they give you the access, they give you the insider information on, or not inside information, inside insights on how like high growth companies kind of operate. And then you have the guys who just have a phone book, have a giant phone book, and they don't do anything but help you make intros. And they're the guys that are like marketing machines, right? Like you work with them, and then they have the platform, and then you just like kind of use their platform. And you can't go to the platform guy and say, "Hey, can you tell me how Datadog became so big?" Because they have no clue. They're marketing people. But equally, you can't go to the guys who back Datadog and say like, hey, why don't you have more Twitter followers? Because that's not what they do. So I think it's like expectations kind of get frayed when you think a VC is omnipotent, right? Like they can do everything, but they can't do everything. Like everybody has their own specialties, and and you need to, I guess, work with them accordingly.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what's the biggest change you've made within the business since you became VC backed?
I don't think there's like it's not that clear cut. Like there isn't a change that I've made because I'm like, oh, now I'm VC backed and I do make that change. I think,
but maybe like having a stronger emphasis on one particular KPI, having a stronger emphasis on one specific go-to-market action, or if there's nothing specifically.
Actually,
I think that's the best answer actually.
Yeah,
maybe you shouldn't change your business model for it.
Yeah, because like as I said, it was more like I was saying to Jack before we raised. I was like, look, this is gonna be much bigger than where we are now, and like this is the plan to get there, and I'm gonna get buy-in from this about this plan and get money to fund the plan. And so get the money, you already have agreed to
the plan. Yeah,
there isn't like there's some, I guess, twists and turns, but like it's not like you go in, you take money, and suddenly your life changes. It's more like it's a solution, right? It's a partnership, and you have something they want, they have something you want, and you kind of collaborate to do that. It's actually, to me, it's incredibly similar to closing a giant enterprise deal, right? Like your life, you don't do anything different because you closed Intel, right? Like Intel starts using joint flows, like you're not going to change anything. You're going to
carry on.
let's deliver, right? Yeah, let's close another. So like there isn't. I think this is maybe the key, right? Like, and I'm not trying to, I guess, push this point onto you, but more in general, what I've seen, there's a myth around VC, right? Like you take VC, your business changes, or like it's much easier. Some people say, actually, you take VC, it's much harder. I actually think you take VC, nothing really changes. Because as a young business, all the change comes from the founders. And like you're still on the hook to drive the change. It's just that you've sort of publicly committed or declared your will to go from what is your few hundred K at seed to $1 million and a bit in A, and then 4 million and a bit in B, whatever those numbers are. Like committed to going on an exponential journey. But nothing should change because you get VC. If anything, you're changing their portfolio.
Yeah. It's really it's a very refreshing conversation because we're in the thick of it. We're thinking about, okay, what do the next 6 months look like? The next year, when do we raise? Do we not raise? Do we bootstrap a little bit longer to get to that next, core metric? If you had to do it again and you answered a lot of the questions through that conversation, there's always a little bit of context about when the raise was made and the macroeconomics around it. But all things being equal to today, what would you do different if you were to launch your company today and think about these first few months, these first few years?
So I think one of the things that I don't do enough, and I should really, really spend more time doing, is to start at the end, right? I think that's the right way to like launch a business. It's what is 100 million in revenue for this company? Right. So for example, for us, let's say 100 million revenue. Let's say when we get to 100 million revenue, we are at 50K ACV, right? So that's 2,000 customers. Like where am I gonna find 2,000 customers that pay me 50K each? How big do they need to be? Like all bottoms up, like territory planning. And I think that kind of teases out a lot of the questions that you need to answer before you launch the business. Because if you start from the end, you can be like, okay, I want to get to 100 million in 7 years, 5 years, let's say. And if I get to 100 million in 5 years, then year 4 would be 50, year 3 would be like 15, and then year 2 would be 5, and so year 1 needs to be 1. And you're like, well, this sounds pretty crazy. Like, is this the idea that I can execute? Like, is this the product market fit that could carry this kind of growth? And then so you like really work backwards and really think through like, okay, what do you think the end ACV is? Even if it's a guess, right? Like it's always going to be a guess, but even if you have like a bit of a, like if you're building Loom, like you will never have a 50K deal, or like it's very rare for you to get a 50K deal because you would have a lot of like $5 deals that stack up, right? Whereas if you're building SAP, right, chances are you're gonna go from top down, where you're gonna start with 100K, 200K deals, and then go down. So like planning all of this out, like as a little mental exercise to make sure that it works, is, I think, the thing that I would do again. So because once you have this, then you can then say, okay, to go from 0 to 1. I need this before I launch the business, right? You probably need to map out who are the 70 to 100 companies that would buy you in the first year. Why would they buy you? What are they using now? What is your value prop? What's your 3 whys? All of these things. And then you know what to build. And then you also know like when you will run out of TAM in Europe, and then you can go to the States. And if you run out of TAM in Europe at a certain year, then you can raise VC or like US kind of friendly VCs at a certain point. And so you want to map out all of these things. And I think a lot of people instead go the other way, and ourselves included, where you're like, oh, I have this amazing idea. Let's build this amazing idea. This like, I built this, use it. And it's very product first, which is not a problem, by the way. Like it's just like a great way to get started. Like everybody starts with like a product idea, right? Like I can't get a taxi, or like I can't get my food, or I can't get books online. Like all of these things are like you start with a product idea. But I think like at least these 18 months of what is a crazy market, like it really kind of forced me to think about, actually, ultimately you're building a business, right? Like the products is as much of a solution to your growth as VC is. So you want to like really kind of index on what is the growth you want to see, what is the growth you want to engineer, and then work backwards and say, can this product bring me there? If not, then it's fine. Like build a product, like just pocket the money, don't share with anybody else.
Yeah, no, amazing. Rudy, I really enjoyed the conversation with you today, but I do think we're out of time. But we've got one final question, which we ask a closing tradition. Through your whole career to date, what is your best memory so far and why?
Ooh.
It's a real thinker.
He's a real thinker. Best memory.
Yeah, I don't have that many memories. For me, it's quite easy.
For me, it's quite straightforward.
It's like 1 or 2. Oh, this one.
Rudy's got a lot of highs in his career.
Yeah. No way. I think the one that I think is the most fun to share is in the early stages of Tactic, we didn't have a lot of believers, and it was quite hard. Like we just quite hard to raise funding. People don't know what we like. We try to nail the pitch. It's all a little bit like, I guess, all over the place. And then like my co-founder and I kind of like really struggled through it. And the high was on the day we signed the term sheet, he sent me a Slack message that said, "You're a genius." And that was like the best moment of the whole journey, not because my co-founder thinks I'm a genius, because we both probably are, but it's more like the kind of the months, not and then maybe a couple of years of hard work where it's all kind of like all over the place. We finally got to a place where it was presentable, where we had like one of the world's best VCs partnered with us. And like I think it all kind of condensed into that one message that he sent me, where it was like we did it kind of thing. Yeah. And that was like kind of one of the most memorable moments.
Amazing.
Amazing.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Rudy. It's been really great having you on the show. This has been the Revenue Revolution podcast, sponsored by Joint Flows. Until next time, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.